Welcome to the Forbidden Frontier.
Big interest in panspermia, and kind of ended up the same way, where I got in touch with who I find to be the most credible and interesting scientists in the field 15 years ago. Where would you like me to start?
The definition of panspermia.
And the difference between the panspermia theory and the radical panspermia theory, there's not really a lot. Like, what makes it radical? I'm curious about that addition.
I do that to distinguish from the first research people will do on panspermia. I don't think it's interesting. And then radical panspermia is actually what I think is going on. And it's actually much more radical than the general descriptions of panspermia. But panspermia, it's the idea that life, space isn't without life, and that it moves around. So we already are well acquainted with the idea, and plenty of work being done on this, that there might be alien life elsewhere visiting us in craft. But you kind of got to tone it down and say, okay, let's talk about basics. If there are people flying around in machines, what kind of life is out there that is less than that? Because that's kind of hard to determine. And of course, NASA's very into that, and they're looking at other planets for life. Panspermia says that it's actually being transported between worlds is the first step. And what hobbles it with some descriptions is that it'll be presented as, hey, life began on Earth. Are we seeding the rest of the solar system, the galaxy, the universe? Well, that's just as arrogant as thinking. My first step is life didn't start here. Aristotle, but he said two things that I think are interesting and relevant here. The stars and the planets and the sun, that they orbit around us. We are central. And he also said that life began in a warm little pond. So it took till roughly the Galileo and the Copernicus, I think it was in the 1400s, to say, no, we're not the center of what we're seeing out there, right? And now that is just secondhand, and it seems so silly to think that they thought that all of this moved around us. But it's what it looks like, and we had to think our way out of it. Well, what else does it look like? It looks like we're the only people around and we started here. Well, that ain't true. It's going to take another 600 years to disabuse us of the second notion that all life started here in a warm little pond. And I mean, it's truly that profound that we are so stuck on that idea that is intrinsic to the way science approaches it, that there have been endless studies to try to determine how in the world some collection of molecules and chemicals 4 billion years ago on this planet resulted in us. Well, just give yourself another 13 billion years, that helps, or another 8 billion. And give yourself all of the cosmos, all of the universe. Who the hell cares when it arose? Is kind of where I am, because it is so profoundly timeless that it is intrinsic to the universe. And I don't make all this stuff up myself. That is part of what Hoyle and Wickramasinghe, who we'll discuss, and Fred Hoyle said. And they called it cosmic ancestry, that everything is descended from things in the cosmos. Then if you want to just drill down to the sexy stuff, nuts like me believe
Panspermia.
That's right, that it's moving around. So that's panspermia. Radical panspermists like myself believe that evolution was dramatically affected by contributions of viral DNA through retroviral processes and whatnot, that is input from above and is raining down on us right now by the trillions and trillions.
Like the Cambrian explosion is one of the things that they point to that would prove there was an uptick in oxygen after this happened. Think in the layers, they started finding more organisms after that point.
It just exploded. So the question is, one, what happened to the stuff before? And two, where did all this stuff, come from all of a sudden? But that is one of the big jumps on the graphs of the contributions to life. In other words, it's happening right now. There's always a stream of not life, but DNA coming in. It comes in comet dust, something kind of reasonable, like 80 tons a day, because, dust is not that heavy, but it is constantly raining down us. So where did that dust come from? Best umbrella term is comets, proto material that's floating around out there. According to Chandra and Fred, comets are seething balls of bacteria and microorganisms. They're absolutely living. And if you go compare Comet Halley's spectra to the spectra of some microorganisms, it matches. There is no reason not to believe. Say, well, we just discovered that. No, hell no, we wouldn't. Shit, we sent one probe to look for life on Mars. One time it found life and we weren't able to admit it to ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if y'all have done that, but it's just the Viking landers, 3 experiments confirmed life. And then they found a way to talk them out of it.
And did the same thing with water for years. They knew water was up there. They knew water was on the moon. And they're like, no, it wasn't.
It's because we have a model in our head.
Yeah.
Well, there's also institutional reasons, but there's just a huge cultural reason. If every single person on Earth thinks the moon doesn't have water. I mean, it's the moon. It might as well be a piece of cheese the way you're thinking about it. No. There's just a lot more going on. And just because you were given that model of thinking about things, there aren't particles of life, desiccated, frozen, hibernating, if you will. Just add water and heat. Life, microorganisms embedded in cosmic dust, which is potentially visible. You don't have to break out the atomic microscope to see a piece of cosmic dust, but you do have to see the particles that may be in it. And the viruses and stuff are 1,000,000 times smaller than that little thing you can see. So that's a great space station.
We're floating around through dust. Could be dust from a planet that never formed, a planet that collided with something.
That's right.
Asteroids,
dust,
or
larger objects, to get to what Adam said, at times is going to be a big jump. You're going to be in that very life-rich cloud. Maybe, you're pelted by actual things that also cause a catastrophe that wipe out the previous life, and it contributes to the mix. So think of Earth as a life collection plate, and it's intuitive to humans too. It's funny, you both buy into it, and then it's also intuitive that some of the stuff is bullshit. I saw a bug in the backyard of where I am earlier today, and the first thing I said, well, it has a planet. How did this German Shepherd here and that bug and me and an elephant, how did it all branch out that way?
I thought that was going to be a walk into a bar joke.
Astrobiologists, which is the most worthless, dismal, self-defeating bunch of bullshitters that ever existed in any scientific discipline. They are literally have been in the job day one, not investigating properly what they're into. It's just unbelievable. They go, okay, well, maybe it started somewhere else, but we don't know where that is, so it doesn't make any difference. One day, and I said, hey, Chandra, let me get this straight. Are you saying there are worlds out there where one's going to be kind of heavy on whales? It's a lot of water. That's kind of the dominant. It's whales, and yet maybe has some birds or whatever, or has its own mix. And then there are other planets that are more accommodating and heavier in insects. And that's where kind of insects are evolving. Maybe it's that galaxy or whatnot. But all of this stuff is emerging in various mixes. And just think of the Earth as a collection plate, not the only one. It's being collected, and other collection plates are going to look different. But all these things that you're like, oh my God, how is it all connected? They started out there. And we've just been receiving contributions of that DNA ultimately. And things didn't go like the squid didn't turn into the octopus at the Cambrian explosion. That's one of the things that changed. All of a sudden, squids, still squids, but then this thing pops up called an octopus.
The octopus comes from those eggs that they found that had 3 hearts. Right. So wait, confirmed octopuses are aliens? I mean, I always thought weird. It anyway.
I think we all are. I agree with George. I think we all are. It's like cosmic spores, and it comes down and it rains down, and some of it takes and some of it doesn't, and it takes in certain different ways depending on the environment of the planet, which changes constantly. Adam, you talked about there being more oxygen, and it looks like there was more oxygen not too long ago prior to the Younger Dryas, because there was a lot of big things on this Earth that couldn't really
survive.
Wouldn't really survive today. I think it's completely viable. And that's what I believe.
The biggest proof that I saw was an asteroid, the Murchison meteorite. It fell in 1969. They found organic compounds, tens of thousands of them inside this meteorite. I mean, doesn't that just instantly reveal that
they found fossils? As Malcolm Bendall called it, we were contested right there, because that was my punchline. I think it was 96, right before we got out of office, maybe 95. Bill Clinton went in the Rose Garden, had a press conference, and said, we found life on Mars. The second time, they were just about to just say, hell, and they sit and have those bureaucratic meetings, and somehow they rolled that one back. Talk about memory holding.
There's a big difference between finding life on Mars and finding ancient fossils that life was on Mars a long time ago, which is what they found.
But stage one
life on Mars, technically.
Well, we would maintain that there's life on Mars now.
I believe.
No. It's littered with microbial life. It's all what you're testing for. So we sent the Viking landers there, and not one single spaceship has had a life detection device on it since. No probes, no rovers. Whenever you see this term, let the red flags go up, the term building blocks of life.
Okay.
And you will see that in life detection stuff and life experimentation, life in space. It's always that's astrobiologists love to talk about how they're finding these building blocks all over the way. No, it's damn life. You went and looked at yourself with determined your chemical composition, the detecting what you are. They'd say, there's a bunch of building blocks of life there in Adam Krigler. The chemistry they're detecting out there is actually life. But remember, if you're just saying, oh, it's this molecule and that molecule and that molecule, that's what it would take to put together life. It'd say, well, if it was actually life, microbial life out there, would you get the same reading? Yes, but that doesn't exist. It's such bullshit. And I tell you, we are so close to punching through it, and I want it to come in Chandra Wickramasinghe's life. He has an amazing life story. He's a Sri Lankan. First of all, his father was a mathematical genius in the capital of Sri Lanka. His brother was as well, and then Chandra was as well. And they did testing back then. The British Empire, which existed in his lifetime when he was a little boy, they would test everybody to find the smartest brown people out there. And we'll give them a scholarship and let them come to Cambridge or Oxford. And this was a government program. They get it kind of makes sense, but they were out there and said, okay, who in the
original
empire?
DEI?
Yeah, kind of, but no, at least it was a meritocracy. You had to be smart.
Okay.
And you had to beat every other kid in the test in Sri Lanka. So that was Chandra. So he won a scholarship from England to come to Cambridge. All expense paid. And he got on a steamship when he was 17 years old. So his parents kiss him goodbye as a 17-year-old and send him off on a steamship to England to the hands of Sir Fred Hoyle, who was the greatest British scientist of the 20th century. And they delivered Chandra to him, and he became his protege. And that was about 1960 or so. And they started doing early kind of geochemical analysis, interpretation of things in space. They came forward in the late 60s and had the astounding discovery that still stands today. If you go look at galactic clouds of dust, and so you kind of picture that dust as like a bunch of mica or something. So they discovered that very, very important thing. And then they kept going and said, okay, what kind of organic molecules are these? Chandra's brother, Daryl, went and took a telescope. He ran the telescope in Australia, and they did the spectra of a galactic cloud and looked at its spectra that shows the various wavelengths of light. And it matched E. coli perfectly. So if you had a gigantic hundreds of millions of miles across cloud of E. coli, that's what the spectra would look like. Nobody would deny that. But of course, it went nowhere. So they published 70 papers in Nature. This is a guy who's a sir and the smartest boy in the empire at Cambridge in Nature, saying, look, world, it's everywhere out there. It's in comets, it's on all the planets. There's probably a little less of it on the moon because there's no atmosphere. It's every place that you can imagine, including just floating around there in comet dust, is life, and that's why we're here. They were never refuted, only ignored, forgotten, and derided. His life story is generally reported that he went, Fred got a little sketchy towards the last 20 years. How insulting is that? No, he took us where we needed to be. For a variety of bullshit, sociological, creepy human reasons, we couldn't admit it to ourselves. And even created a discipline. They were the first astrobiologists. No one had ever, that was a bizarre term in 1969. And the astrobiologists today will not credit them to save their life.
There's also the possibility of life in the clouds of Venus, where the temperature it's in like the 70s. You have to go pretty high. The surface of the planet is about 800 degrees. Again, filled with methane. There's other sources of methane. One of the main sources of it is life. When George just brought up, there's seasonal methane on Mars. We've already caught NASA bullshitting us about, they were putting that red hue to the pictures forever. And now you see pictures of it, and it looks like the effing California desert. Got a blue sky, little grayish blue sky. Not all the sand is red. It's black. It's all different colors. You see little wisps of clouds close to the surface, which means there has to be some kind of fucking moisture there.
I spent 10 years looking at those pictures of craters drooling shit down the side, and they're sitting there saying we haven't proved it yet.
Every single scientific industry, it's the same thing. They don't want to be wrong. And the fundamental parts of science is finding out you're wrong. And a good scientist would be happy to find out that they're wrong.
Job security.
Well, you want to know the truth of it.
Yes.
And most of science is questioning over and over and over again. It's like all of these, it's not just, astrobiology, it's everything, archaeology, medicine, all this stuff. It's like these people want to just rigidly hold on to what they know instead of allowing themselves to be corrected and having to do the work. It feels like they're lazy. I want to just keep the easy road until I die kind of energy. And it sucks because it's holding us back.
My personal working explanation for that summary is kind of mundane. And it's because of bureaucracies, man.
Yep.
Bureaucracies are a terrible, terrible human phenomena that has to be resisted. And the private sector has them too. This is not just a government, but at least those big corporate bureaucracies, somebody comes in occasionally and starts fucking firing people. If you don't have somebody at the top that can fire anybody below them, you got a bureaucracy. And what happened in the 20th century is all the people responsible for discovery became bureaucrats first and curious people second, man. And bureaucracies don't discover shit. The space station.
Oh yeah, it's got mold and fungus all over it.
Yeah. Well, there's fungus on the inside, and it probably got in from the outside, and there was fungus on the outside too, Adam. And there's also viruses,
radiation resistant
bacteria,
fungus.
Yep,
that's right. Plankton found on outside of space station. And I was like, hell yes, Chandra's been proven right. He's gonna get vindicated. They found plankton. And man, you talk about some crickets. It went clickbait for like 3 days. Zero like follow-up. Then I had missed that that was like 2015. Then in 2018, I believe it was, they actually did come out with a paper. It, of course, got crickets. Then that didn't even become clickbait. But what they said in the paper, they described their testing protocols, methods, their results, their conclusions, all of that, just as a scientific paper does, and said 10 times in 6 trips or whatever, they went out in spacewalks. It took years. The DNA of bacteria, the world's ocean and Earth is in cosmic dust at the International Space Station.
That's an incredible sentence. The same DNA in the world's ocean is on the space station.
What they did on these spacewalks is the Russians took a tampon. Yeah, and they described like the type of tampon, but they took it and actually swiped that window. It's a big window, actually, like a tourist window on the space station. Came back and then sent it all back to Russia. And the people at the top of that paper had their hands on stuff that it took a spacewalk to obtain. They're probably credible people, serious stuff, not your run-of-the-mill scientists. They're in that lane. And they took it back, and it was just absolutely chock-a-block full with particles of life, everything from E. coli to certain planktons and diatoms and diatomaceous planktons, I think you call them, staph. Then they're presented with a problem. The paradigm is, because that had never been noted before, that 400 kilometers up, there's life. Okay, where'd it come from? You got either it's going to be contamination. They ruled out contamination because they were the people conducting the thing, and they felt that they followed the protocols. They are presented with a problem. And what they say in the paper, there are only 2 options here. Either it came from above or it came from below. They punted to say that it came from above. They attributed an unknown electrical vortex process that somehow captures. They trace some of the plankton to the Barents Sea. And they said, oh, we don't really know how this works, but clearly it's swirling its way up into the edges of that.
You got caught in a water spout.
400 miles.
And,
The lead author, if I'm not incorrect, is TV Grabenikova, the woman who discovered life in space. It should be in every child's book.
Now, was it her tampon or?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It had to go there. So they publish a paper that equivocates whether it's above or below, or actually leans towards below. Then I think it was within a year or so, Grabenikova joins Chandra.
Second line.
She and I think 1 or 2 of the other Russian scientists went and joined Chandra Wickramasinghe, and then they're unequivocal that it came from above. It's a tell. You could take those 2 papers and you're like, well, Grabenikova, for whatever reason, didn't agree with their conclusions on the first paper. Then they jump ship and tell the truth. Here's another cool twist to this. If the first paper is right and that it came from below, well, that proves panspermia. Then we're breathing life out in the cosmos.
Yeah.
And it can survive out there. Yeah.
Either way, it's an incredible discovery. The more incredible thing happens to be true. How can you be the space reporter for NBC News and just not go, hey, what's the deal with this? I mean, they don't even bother to rule the shit out. Because when somebody looks into it, they go, oh, this is true. Am I going to be the one to say it? No.
You understand why they started out with the system of checks and balances. We need to make sure that people aren't full of shit. We completely get it, but it has turned into information gatekeeping now, and it's just run amok. It's bureaucracy, which stifles all progress whatsoever. It's constant. It's the way of the world, and it sucks. And that's why what they do is they create this vacuum that amateurs and will go out there and fill. They'll get more attention, and now we're seeing that cycle happen right now. I mean, it's insane to think there isn't life in the universe.